All right, right now here on Inside Arkansas Live, we have a very special guest, a guy who knows a lot about the college football landscape, but especially with this latest with the Razorbacks and Hunter Yurachek and demanding their NIL money back. It's been an entire thing, but who better to talk about it than to welcome in Brandon Marcello of CBS Sports as well as 24/7 Sports, and he joins us now. Just like I wouldn't say it's every month, but we occasionally talk with him. But Brandon, appreciate you joining us, man. How you doing?
I'm good, John. How are you, man?
I'm doing good, and I appreciate you being on top of all of these things that's been going on. But I want to start with the situation when you first got wind of Arkansas wanting that money. You had the Hunter Yurachek putting out that statement on social media. Really put a lot of things into motion and a lot of things in perspective. But just what was your reaction to when you first saw Yurachek taking that approach, and also the stance that Arkansas has taken when dealing with trying to collect their NIL money?
I was a bit surprised because you haven't seen any school or collective or athletics director come out and just straight up said, hey, let's go after the buyout money in these contracts. For so long, athletic directors, these collectives, these schools have been reluctant to even chase the money in these clauses because they think it would be bad PR potentially. And also, there's been questions about the legality of these contracts anyway, before revenue sharing comes into play. Potentially on July 1, but also with all the lawsuits we've seen over the last 5 years against the NCAA. And when it comes to the value of student athletes and everything. So it was a bit surprising from that standpoint. And then doing some reporting afterward, it became clear to me that, Arkansas saw an opportunity here publicly to strike because let's face it, the Iamaleava family has not been on the positive side of the headlines the last few weeks. And when Nico at Tennessee had that holdout with them and then his departure, the overwhelming response was in the positive for Tennessee's side of things rather than Nico Iamaleava. And then when his little brother, Madden, who's only been on Arkansas's campus for 3.5 months, decides, hey, I'm going to leave and I'm homesick and all that, that becomes an issue for schools because, several schools, a lot of schools, they'll bring a player on campus in January and then they go through spring practice and they leave. But rarely do you see it where it's like a quarterback signee you bring in, especially a freshman, and then they leave. So you've invested money, of course, into the player and sign a contract, but also you're investing time, coaching time and development into that player, and you're taking snaps away from other players that could potentially be on campus because you're on the understanding with that contract that you've signed for a year or whatever long that you're going to be there that upcoming season and potentially beyond. And so that's why they put together these deals. They don't put together, a semester deal or whatever. They put together a full year with the understanding of you're going to play through this season. And that's kind of Arkansas's standing of it. They saw an opportunity here to kind of go public with all of this because they had already previously been chasing money from receiver Desmond James, who didn't do anything last season until that bowl game, and he exploded in that, signs a new contract with Arkansas, then opts a few days later to leave. And so when you bundle this all together, Arkansas sees an opportunity here to do this. And college athletics world, I'll tell you right now, is keeping a very close eye on this. Every administrator and coach I've talked to since this kind of broke last week are just enthralled with it because this is going to set a precedent for them because they've also been reluctant to pursue things. But depending on how this all ends, will kind of determine what schools all across the country do in the very near future.
Well, you mentioned it, and I know you've talked about how this type of thing has happened before. It's just a matter of a school like Arkansas kind of stepping up to the plate and having these demand letters sent out for contract. How prevalent is it? I mean, is it something to where for a long time, a lot of these players who either transferred out or whatever just said, okay, try something and I'm going to keep my money over here? Is it maybe some agents' representations knowing that most schools aren't going to pursue it, so they encourage their guys, but hey, they're not going to do anything, don't worry about it? I mean, how prevalent and how deep does this go as far as the behavior of something like this particular incident?
A lot, not all, but of course, not all contracts include buyouts right now for these players. So you have to consider that as well. A lot more of these, especially as you've seen, Blueprint Sports, which helps run the Arkansas NIL collective, and interestingly enough, also run the UCLA collective where Madden transferred to. They've been more so putting, buyouts in these contracts as well. But again, a lot of schools just aren't really enforcing it. And I think that, word gets around, of course, among agents and players, and then they don't feel like these things have teeth to them. So they're more likely to leave. And that's what makes this so much more important. And why everybody in college athletics is watching this, because that might change. If Arkansas ends up going to court with this and then ends up winning it in front of a judge, that sets a precedent for this, because we haven't seen this happen in the public arena right now. And then, of course, also there's a possibility with all the legal threats from Arkansas's side that maybe there's a settlement of some sort out of court, which would again set a precedent for these schools to kind of follow.
Well, I think another thing that people are interested in is anytime they hear the name Tom Mars get mentioned, especially in college athletics. He's a guy that's done a lot of different things in a lot of different angles, and the Arkansas Edge has kind of hired him on. What kind of impact and what type of angle does that have when you bring in somebody like a Tom Mars? What's kind of going to be his role, and what kind of impact can it have on the end result of whatever ends up happening here?
He's an attorney, as a lot of people know, and he's been dealt with a couple of Arkansas related cases in the past. He just doesn't lose cases. He ends up getting something that is agreeable with his clients. And so that's a pretty big hire on Arkansas side. Meanwhile, Desmond James is being represented by Darren Heitner, who, if you're on X and Twitter, you've heard that name in college football, because he's been heavily involved in the NIL space and is a player advocate and has been for several years. He's helped kind of form the one of the collectives at Florida a few years ago. He's helped athletes kind of negotiate and understand contracts that they are signing at some of these schools. And he reached out to me after this all broke and told me that, hey, I'm representing Desmond James. And, he told me that he believes that this contract's unlawful, can't be enforced, and they believe that they'll win in court should it go there. And here it is, early this week. I've keep following it while I'm working on other things, of course, but my understanding is that Arkansas's NIL folks, the representation there, has talked to both parties, Desmond James and Nico Yamaliava, their representatives right now. And the understanding that I'm getting is that both players plan on battling this. They believe that they don't owe a buyout, and that has continued even after everything that's ramped up here in the public space the last several days. So this could get interesting here in the next week or two.
Speaking with Brandon Marcello of CBS Sports as well as 24/7 Sports. So, Brandon, knowing that, just how far do you think Arkansas is going to take it? Because Yurachek making that statement to me at least said, "Hey, I'm putting this out there," and I feel like making that statement doesn't mean, okay, well, this is it, and I'm stepping back, and then if something happens, I fold. Like, how deep do you think Arkansas and a university like that is going to take it? And also, do you think other universities are kind of hoping that they do take it pretty far to set that precedent that you're mentioning?
Yeah, potentially. The one thing I would say is, like, no one really wants to go to court anyway. They just want to get everything done out of court, because you get into discovery and the courtroom very much kind of shines a bright light on the darkness. So you'll see text messages, emails, maybe phone conversations and stuff like that pop up that, might be embarrassing for one side or another, or maybe both sides, that they don't necessarily want out there in the public. And that's usually kind of what leads to settlements out of court anyway, because they don't want their dirty laundry out there. And I wrote about this Tuesday for CBS Sports in my mailbag, just about like the not necessarily the dangers, but the positives and negatives of this for both sides. As much as like the court of public opinion's been like on Arkansas side with this, because I think a lot of that's been driven by the Iamaliava saga with the brothers. Both sides have something to lose here, and that's kind of some, not necessarily respect, but kind of a blemish on their brand or resume and the way they go about business. Because if it does go to court, maybe some other things would come out, and I would assume that neither side wants to do that. But I do know that if it were to go to court, and if it was in Washington County in circuit court, that Arkansas, I would think, would probably have a pretty sizable advantage there, with having a judge overseeing that's in the Arkansas area and understands what's going on. Whereas if it was in a different venue, I don't know if Arkansas would have as much of a favorability there. And, I don't think, I think if you gave truth serum to everybody in the involved in all this, I wouldn't think any of them would want to go to court. But if it goes to court, it would be fascinating.
Yeah, I would think the last time something as big as this was in a court was like when Nolan Richardson got fired, and that whole thing, which, it didn't end up being a great deal. And I'm with you as far as the winners and losers of all this. But I think from the Razorback fan perspective, at least the fans I've been talking about, this is such a conundrum because I think the vast majority of people, which you can get almost nobody to agree on anything, I think the vast majority of the people are like, hey, I agree that if you sign a contract, you have to uphold your end of the bargain, and whether you're on one side or the other. And if you break said contract, and in that contract stated, here are the consequences of it, you should have to pay that. I think everybody agrees with that. It's on board. But then at the same time, it's like, well, do you really want to be that school that's known for, hey, you better not go to have other people recruiting against you. Better not go over there because if something goes wrong, they're going to come after you and they're going to sue you. Do you feel like this is going to hurt Arkansas in the long run because of that image that you talked about, and also the fact that they don't want to be maybe known as that school that, hey, if you don't uphold every end of your bargain, we're going to take you to court and it's going to get messy with you?
I don't know, and the reason why I say that is because, like, if Arkansas goes through with this and ends up coming on the right side of it, other schools are going to end up doing it. So the other coaches who are trying to negatively recruit against Arkansas, if that's the case, they should know that their school is probably going to end up doing the same thing too. Maybe not as publicly, but they'll end up doing it too because Arkansas set the precedent for this. But listen, every school is getting negatively recruited against for multiple reasons or whatever, things we don't even know about. And that's just the way it goes. It's always been like that. I'm not sure this would be something that would drastically affect Arkansas. That's why, for example, like last week, Arkansas signed into law allowing student athletes, players, to not have to pay state income tax on their NIL money, which no one else is doing out there. You would see that as a positive, right? And the everyday, or not the everyday fan, but the casual fan doesn't really pay attention to things, and they hear that, they might automatically think, "Whoa, man, that means maybe we can get a big time player that we haven't really been able to get in the past." No, probably not, because at the end of the day, yeah, money matters a lot to these kids, but at the end of the day, they still want to go to certain programs, things that fit them. They want to be around those type of coaches that they really get along with. And, rarely does like this negative recruiting stuff really change the way things go either way. Otherwise, you would see more, 5-star players every now and again flaking out on, such and such school that's used to getting them going to a smaller school. By that, I mean, just a school that doesn't win, 10, 11 games every year. At the end of the day, they're usually drawn to the programs that fits them best.
It's funny you brought that up because that was going to be my final question to you was about the state income tax and how, in Arkansas, I know a lot of fans are sitting there like, I don't want to pay income taxes, but yet the student athletes, they don't have to pay it, which, not to get to the political side of things, but it is an interesting tactic. What type, I know you went into it a little bit, but what type of impact do you think that'll have? And is this something that like is common and maybe you see other places do it, but why Arkansas? Why they start with that? Why go that direction in the legal side of things here in the state of Arkansas?
Well, Georgia tried to do it and it failed. It did not get passed there. And a lot of people kind of assumed that was going to end up happening there. And Georgia has been very much in lockstep with the University of Georgia in this NIL space, but they didn't do it. And then Arkansas ends up doing it. I'm not sure that a lot of other universities will be able to convince their state legislatures to do this. That's just my take on it here in the early going after, this just happened a few days ago. But I can understand the frustration among residents in Arkansas. I'm a resident of Arkansas. It'd be nice if I didn't have to pay state income tax. It'd be nice for anybody to be able to say that, but I do think that, everybody wants to see players get paid. You don't want us to go back to the way it was, but again, I think what's been not lost in this, but a lot of people understand this, is like over the last 4 to 5 years, we've been doing all these things that we've wanted for players for a while and believe they deserve, but we're doing so without actually treating them like adults and then also preparing them for adulthood in a lot of ways. We've just kind of thrown this money at them without saying, well, you need an agent who's registered with the state or this or that. You need a lawyer to look over these documents. and you need to remember to pay your taxes. And a lot of schools have done some education with that, but again, they're still kids, and they're probably also being led by some agents that aren't necessarily looking out for their best interests, or for that matter, have never been agents before and just jumped into this because they see, like in anything in life, they see a fresh market that's brand new. They can go exploit it and go make some money, right? And that's kind of what the NIL space had turned into over the last couple of years. And it's led to some really bad things, some shady dealings. And, but again, I think all that say, a lot of the, fans, they sit there and see these developments and they start going, well, why are we saying you don't have to pay state income tax? Well, I have to. Teachers have to, why do they have to do it and you don't? Explain that to me. Why do we keep doing this stuff without properly explaining it? Also, and you're seeing it also with this case with Arkansas going after these two players, Madni Amaliava and Desmond James, where the adults in the state and across the country are going, yeah, enforce your contracts. I have to sign contracts sometimes, whether it's on a house or even with my job, and I have to, follow those directions. Why do they not have to? If they're wanting to be adults and we're trying to prepare them from adulthood, why aren't we treating them like adults? So you're starting to see some pushback a little bit, right? From the common fan and the common person against what's been happening with the NIL space. But I think, again, that's not necessarily the fault of the players. It's actually the fault of the adults in the room for not properly preparing them for this, but also just throwing all this at them and all these, potential, traps and things they could fall into. And we're just doing a terrible job of setting them up for success in this system.
Yeah, I just feel like, hey, if you told Razorback fans, does it mean if you get a national championship in a sport, as long as you get to pay income taxes and they don't, maybe most people sign up for that. But that's just the fandom coming out. But it is a crazy world that's out there, and it continues to develop each and every day. And I know you've been on top of it. So for those of you who have not read all the reports and who's going to be up to date on the reports, be sure to check out Brandon Marcello and all of his work there at CBS Sports, as well as 24/7 Sports, and keeping you all informed on the latest with NIL, with Arkansas, with college football and everything. But Brandon, appreciate you joining us, man. Enjoy it, and we'll be catching up with you later down the road.
All right. Thanks, John.